Welcome back to Ask a Pop. Today we're talking about here's a story. Now you tell me about it in your words. Now have you ever heard of that game Telephone? It's where you start telling somebody something in their ear, then they whisper it to somebody else, then they whisper it to the next person, and so on down the line. That's how you end up getting Davy Crockett sinking the Titanic while fighting Napoleon in the Civil War, and his Trojan horse ends up running into that same said Titanic. But stories are important, especially when they come from somebody who's important. And if it's a true story and it's got a lesson attached, heck, it's golden. And you know what? I was blessed to have awesome teachers in the form of Papa, Papa, Mom, Dad, and so many more I couldn't even begin to count. And they all used to tell me stories that had lessons that were mainly true and sometimes 100% true and sometimes less than true. They got me in a little bit of trouble, but that's a different story. But one thing that Papa used to do was I'd come home from church with my Bible and I'd tell him a story that I'd learned in church. And he'd say, "Honey, I'm so proud that you remembered it, but can you tell it to me in your own words?" Now, at first I was a little frustrated at that because it wasn't what was in the Bible, and it certainly wasn't what the person at church, my Sunday school teacher, taught me. So I was a little frustrated, but I'd go back and I'd pray, and then I'd read and I'd pray some more. And it turned out to be the best lesson that I could ever learn from church, because what it did was it taught me to use the Bible as a tool. And then I could go back and tell Papa what that story actually was. And here's a hint: it wasn't the same story a dozen years later or a dozen years after that, because what had happened was is God was telling me what I needed to know right then. And a dozen years later, God would tell me what I needed to know right then. Papa was teaching me in his own way why Jesus taught in parables, so that we can keep teaching our kids the same stories generation after generation and use the Bible as a tool to help God communicate with generation after generation after generation. That's one of the big reasons we started this Ask a Pop ministry. We're so lucky to have so many amazing pops in our lives, and I'm including the mothers in this too, because we can share things like this with the rest of you, and hopefully they won't get lost in time. Just a thought from somebody who's incredibly lucky enough to have had so many wonderful pops in my life. The Bible verses today are Psalm 145, 1 through 13, and Mark 4, 10 through 20. As far as questions go, do you have any pops that you'd like to thank? How about any advice that you'd like to give, that you'd like to put into an Ask a Pop? God bless you. Have a great day.